welcome to 3 Count Commentaries. Today I'm going to do a comparison of the characters of Kenny Omega and Roman Reigns. But first, I want you guys to hit the like button for me. All right. This was brought to my attention by a subscriber. Thank you kindly. So this all begins with Dave Meltzer. Dave Meltzer makes a statement. I'm going to read it. And then it was followed up by some people on Twitter talking about it. And I'm going to talk about that too. In doing this, I'm doing this off the top of my head, so I don't have any notes. So I may ramble a little bit. But I'm going to try to be as clear as I can. Okay? But in order to fully understand this stuff, you have to have knowledge that people like Meltzer typically do not have. Okay? You have to have a different type of skill set. Okay, so I'm going to show you that in a minute. So Meltzer says, in time, Kenny Omega is doing this heel turn to come back and turn and be a big baby face. And whenever that will be in a year or whatever, with Kenny hurting, I don't know when that will be. Roman Reigns and Kenny Omega are essentially the same character, in the sense that they are heels who are being groomed to be the top babyface star down the line of the promotion. AEW is at least trying to book in a way to make the matches exciting. And WWE is trying to book Roman Reigns and tell you, it doesn't matter, he's going to kill the guy. All right, so I want people to understand that a heel is not an archetype. It's not a character, right? Heel is not a character. In pro wrestling, in general, period, there are baby faces and heels, right? And those are very, very, very broad ideas, right? You have, because you can be, there's 100 million different kinds of heels. There's 100 million different kinds of baby faces. To say somebody is a babyface or a heel is not telling you what the character is. That just tells you what their alignment is. It tells you if they're part of an angel or a devil, or a demon, rather. That's all that really tells you. Now, when you talk about archetypes and you talk about characters, you're talking about broad ideas, but less broad than babyface and heel. Okay? Let's say if you look at heel and babyface, that's like a big circle. And then you draw a smaller circle within that. A smaller circle within that would be the archetype. Now, archetypes are human universals. It means they exist in every society in the history of the known planet. You can look at societies and they have things like fertility gods, war gods, river gods, sky fathers. And before, the Christian God came along and the God of Muhammad and all this kind of stuff, which created one singular creator God. That's the, God as a single being that created everything, like in Genesis in the Bible, right? There used to be what they call polytheism. Sometimes people call it paganism. And that is, you have multiple gods. The God of the river, he has a certain temperament, a certain personality. Then you have the God of war. He has a certain temperament and a certain personality. And then you have the God of the sky. He has a certain temperament and a certain personality. And that's really what these archetypes are based on, is how societies saw these individual gods. The easiest one to look at is sort of the gods of fire and war, right? The gods of like fire and war are almost always temperamental, angry, emotional, right? They love strongly. They hate even stronger, right? So that's, what we would call the lover archetype, is being emotional, but also being creative, because the war god has to be creative. And sometimes the war god will also be the god of the fire and the forge, which means craftsmanship, making weapons. Making weapons is a creative endeavor. So you will have creativity, musicians, poets, all those type of people will be artists, right? They will fall under the war gods, okay? Because the war gods are, and the gods of combat are passionate gods. So you will look at that sort of thing. Then you may have gods of writing, like Thoth from Egypt. He's the god of writing. He's the god of thinking. So you will have the intellectuals. You will have gods that are intellectual in nature. Those will be magicians. Your teachers, your professors, your scientists, the people who know things, who took the time to learn things. That's a different type of archetype. Then you'll have your sky fathers. Your sky fathers are usually the kingdom of heaven. The person who sits on the top of the throne, your Zeus. They would be the kings. The king archetype, the rulers, the one above all that sort of thing. And then you may have what's the last one? The warrior. So that will also be like your gods of combat, and and different things like that. But it would be a little bit different from your fire and forge gods, because your gods of war are singularly, war and passions and stuff like that kind of go together, because it's like a physical thing, uh so they'll also be your materialist gods. So your materialist gods would be kind of your war and creativity, because it involves you actually touching things and doing things in your senses. While your intellectual, your spiritual gods would be your gods of your sky fathers, who would be like the rulers, and your intellectuals and that sort of thing. So when we talk about baby faces and heels, you can be a good god of war. Okay, you can be, because there are righteous wars. You can fight a righteous war. You can have righteous love, or you can have vulgar love. You could be the god of lust, which is breaking all of the rules and of relationships and stuff like that. So you have love and you have lust. You have righteous combat as a defender, or you could have combat as being an attacker. So those are babyface and heel dynamics that can fall within the archetype of a god or a character, right? Now, if you are a person who believes in like a singular God, then you have to believe that God encompasses everything. He has wrath and he has love at the same time. While certain gods in polytheistic societies will have those sorts of ideas. Now, the reason I said all that is because you have to understand that when people say that these two characters are the same character, they're not. Okay. They operate in different realms. Now, to further talk into this, somebody sent me a Twitter conversation between two people, and I'm going to read bits and pieces of that. I spent longer on the guys and stuff than I should have. Anyway, it says Reigns' character is a by the numbers generic Western wrestling heel. Omega's character is a satire of that trope. Omega isn't even a heel. He's a flawed character doing bad things. No WWE character has that sort of depth, nor could they have. And then this person says, I don't like the comparisons between Omega and Reigns, mainly because they're not the same planet. And I love what Reigns is doing. It's the only thing in WWE that I'm following now. But Johnny has nailed it here. Oh, sorry, I said his name. Reigns is really great at what he's doing, but Kenny is doing something completely different. That's the main reason I find this comparison so fucking dumb. They are not the same. They have different aims and objectives. That is absolutely true. They do have different aims and objectives. Okay, they are completely different. Now, I don't see what Kenny Omega is doing as being a satire. A satire means he's taking the piss out of it. I don't see why you would do a satire main character, right? Like Orange Cassidy is already doing a satire of wrestling. He's doing it in the mid card though. He makes fun of wrestling by doing the shin kicks and the fake kicks and stuff like that, putting his hands in his pockets and that kind of thing. Like, I don't understand why Kenny Omega would be doing a satire on a different level. But you could say, well, Kenny Omega's doing a satire of like maybe the 80s version of Ric Flair, of somebody like that. And I guess you could read it that way if you wanted to. But what I decided to do is I'm just going to sit here. I'm going to pontificate, because I don't get to talk a lot about, when I talk about archetypes and different things like that, I don't usually use people outside of the WWE, because things can get real inconsistent outside of WWE, because WWE is remarkably consistent in how they portray characters, even if it's kind of dumb, even if the storylines actually suck. Sometimes the characters are really fucking consistent when you really look at it. So let's take a look at Kenny Omega. What is the character of Kenny Omega? So what is a character? Your character is your personality. Your character is how you behave. What are you doing? Right? So in a sense that Kenny Omega is somehow a satire of a Western wrestling heel, it would have to be a big shot territory heel. It would have to be like a Ric Flair, right? So let's take a look at some of the things that Kenny Omega says and does. Okay, now for starters, we need to pay more attention to what a character does. What a character does is sometimes far more important than what they say. because there's always going to be, or most of the time, there's going to be a difference in what a character says and what a character does, and sometimes what a character says is not what they mean. People lie, right? One of my favorite examples when I tell people about characters is look at Kurt Angle, right? Kurt Angle was talking about the three I's: integrity, intelligence, and oh shit. Wait a minute. Sorry, I got distracted. Intensity, intelligence, and integrity, right? So when he says that, those are good heroic traits. To be intense, is to be passionate. To have integrity is to have good moral character, and to be intelligent is to be smart, to be a tactician, to know what you're doing. But when you look at the way Kurt Angle behaves versus his virtues that he's talking about, he violates all of them. He's a coward. He cheats. He runs down the fans. He's judgmental. And so you look at what he says versus what he does. Those are two different concepts, right? But that adds layer to his character, because being a liar isn't just because heels don't have to lie, right? You can tell the truth and be a heel. Sometimes the biggest heels are the people who tell the truth, because sometimes people want to be lied to. That's just the truth, right? Sometimes people want to be lied to, but you tell the truth and you're a heel. Now, in that sense, that's like my favorite example when I tell people, like, look at how a character talks and speaks. And if you was just to read a Kurt Angle promo, you would, until he starts insulting the crowd, you would kind of be like, oh, there's nothing bad about this guy. He's preaching virtues. But then you start seeing how he wrestles and he's cheating and he's doing all this unfair stuff. And then he starts talking about how the crowd sucks and all this kind of stuff, right? So you have Kenny Omega, who is this character, his virtues is all about himself. He's a self-obsessed wrestling god. He uses all of his mark awards to prop himself up. And that includes, being a Pro Wrestling Observer Hall of Fame, being a 7-star wrestler, all that kind of stuff. It all adds to his arrogance and his narcissism as a character. He calls himself a member of the elite. The difference is he is saying, I'm part of the elite. The elite is a group, right? So when he says, we are the elite, the Young Bucks, I guess the Good Brothers are in there too. And I'm guessing Don Callis is in there too. And they all put themselves at the top of the heap, which is what a heel should do. That's the generic Western part, is that everybody believes that they're at the top of the food chain. Because being at the top of the hierarchy is much better than being at the bottom of the fucking hierarchy, right? So he said, we're at the top of the hierarchy. I'm the world champion. I'm the world champion of multiple different promotions. I am a champion of champions. I am a wrestling god. We've seen that gimmick 100 times over already. I'm a wrestling god. I'm at the top of the heap already. So look at how Kenny Omega dresses. He wears these funky suits. He wears loafers. He wears shades. You can see it, again, as a modern Ric Flair, if that's what you want to see. And that's fine. But Kenny Omega is more, I guess, he's more creatively focused, because he sees himself as an artistic wrestler, right? That he goes out there and he has the best matches. He's the best bout machine, right? So his creativity is about bringing in the best that he can be in wrestling terms. And that's fine, but that's completely different. He wants to have good matches and win good matches. I'm the best at wrestling. I have good matches and yada, 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 whatever, right? Now, let's take what Roman Reigns is doing. Roman Reigns bursts on the scene. Before he's even the champion, he's saying that this is my yard. He's claiming territory, right? That's the same as, you take a flag and you plant it. This is mine. And this is before he was even the champion. So he wins the title, and now the title is a means to an end. Now, because he has the title, you have to listen to what he's saying. The title is a means to an end. He's already saying this is my yard, even if I'm not the champion. When he shows back up and he beats up The Fiend and he beats up Braun Strowman, he tells them, you cannot handle this responsibility. You are not responsible. You can't be what I'm being. You're not me, right? This company needs me. You're not me. So you have the king archetype because he's territorial, he's setting boundaries, right? And the best thing that to show you about this is that his situation with Drew McIntyre. When Drew McIntyre came to SmackDown, Roman did not like that at all. That Drew was bringing his dumb ass from Raw to SmackDown is kind of an invasion. And he basically told him, like, get you one of these, meaning a big W, and then we'll talk. You're not on my level. Go get you a big W first, and then we'll have a conversation. So he's basically telling him to shoe on, get the fuck off, and we'll talk about it some other time. He is also putting himself at the top of the heap. He's the tribal chief, right? Chief meaning boss, meaning king, right? Leader. Okay, he's at the top, but it's a solo position. It's not part of a group, right? And Roman doesn't give a shit about having good matches. He cares about winning and maintaining his position. So that's a completely different goal, aim, and objective for Roman Reigns. He doesn't care about having good matches or even wrestling the best opponents. He wanted to fight Adam Pearce, who is like retired. So he didn't care about having the best, most worthy opponents. He wants to, he's contractually obligated to wrestle. He wants to wrestle, but that's it. At WrestleMania, they tried to get him to wrestle twice. He was like, nope, not doing it. You get me one time. He set boundaries. That's part of the king archetype. The king sets boundaries. So he's saying he controls this island of relevancy called SmackDown. He's the face of that. And he's saying, I run this. That's a completely different situation than what Kenny Omega is doing. Kenny Omega is breaking boundaries because he's going from AEW to Impact and back and forth. He's also going to AAA, and they're touting this as being something that's completely different from what anybody else has ever done, even though it's not. But that's the general idea. When you look at boundaries are very important because warriors reinforce the boundaries, right? They either protect or they spread the boundaries. And in other words, you may have, like I said, a warrior, maybe a knight that is sent to another realm to invade and take it over for his king, or he's at the gates keeping intruders out. That's the job of the warrior. The job of the intellectual is to explain the boundaries. Why is this our piece of land and why should it be? It's to create a sacred space. This is our base of power. This is how we get power here. This is where our resources are. The lover is the breaker of boundaries. The lover sees boundaries as being in the way of his passions, of what he wants to do. If you look at Kenny Omega's character from that perspective, he wants to be the champion of champions. He wants to be the wrestling god. He has to break boundaries, meaning he has to go from one show to the other in order to get that second world title that he wants, or that third, or whatever, fourth, whatever he wants, right? While Roman Reigns doesn't care about any other world title. He has what he wants, which is SmackDown. He has set his boundary. Omega breaks boundaries. Roman Reigns reinforces them. He sets them, rather, right? But he also has the ability to reinforce them because he is big and strong and fast. So he is a warrior king, while Omega is a creator and a lover. So it's a completely different character. Now, if you want to look at how they perform these different characters, then again, Omega is kind of foppish. I think somebody actually said that he's pretty foppish, and look. There's nothing wrong with what Kenny Omega is doing. But it is, to me, that's just my opinion, and maybe I am biased, that it's seriously a generically Western wrestling heel. We've seen this. We've seen what Kenny Omega has done. We've seen it with CM Punk. We've seen it with, AJ Styles. We've seen it with Ric Flair. We've seen it with Shawn Michaels. We've seen it with so many other different types of people. With what Roman is doing, we have rarely seen, a character have that more be the warrior king that he is. There are king archetypes in WWE. Triple H is one, right? Not just because he calls himself the King of Kings, but I could go into that, but I'll do it some other time. JBL was another one, even though JBL was never technically a king, right? Again, archetypes are about big ideas, not exactly did the goof run around in a crown. JBL was being the president, right? He was satiring the president. The president is a king, right? So when you think about it from that perspective, there have been other warrior kings, but none of them have really been as strong as Roman is. And by strong, I mean booked as strong. Like Roman will fight a guy straight up, head up, and win. No problem. Right? He has done that. He prefers to cheat because he prefers to do as little as possible, but he will tear a guy apart if he has to. And he does. And he has. Like he took apart Braun Strowman at one time. He took apart Daniel Bryan in their couple of matches. So he can do that if he wants to. Kenny Omega, it's a either or thing. He can beat you by cheating, or he could beat you by pinning you with the one winged angel or whatever. It doesn't really matter to him. But the overall picture between the two is that Kenny Omega is a creator. He is a lover. He is passionate about wrestling. He cares about wrestling. Everything about him is about wrestling. Best bout machine, multiple different championships, Pro Wrestling Observer Hall of Fame, all these kind of stuff that small numbers of people really care about. It doesn't appeal to the wider audience because they don't know what any of that shit means. Like he has 4 belts, nobody knows what they mean, right? Roman Reigns, all he cares about is being the king of SmackDown, being the top of the food chain on SmackDown. And now that he has the spot, he wants everybody to bow to him. Acknowledge me, right? Acknowledge me as your tribal chief. And even though at first you thought it was a Samoan thing, right? Because he was talking to Jey Uso. And then it just became acknowledge me, period, because SmackDown is my tribe. So it's an alpha male position, while Kenny Omega is not really an alpha male position. It's more like, however I get there, I get there. It's sort of, if I have to steal it, I'll steal it. If I have to cheat, I'll cheat. Roman will cheat if he has to, but he doesn't really have to. So these are 2 completely different characters. They're not the same. And the idea that, that they're grooming both of them to be the top babyface. It's like, brother Meltzer, come on, man. Almost every wrestler that has ever been a heel, especially a good heel, has the potential to be a great babyface. Especially if that audience truly accepts them. It can really get over, It's happened with the Road Warriors. It's happened with Dusty. It's happened with Ric Flair. It's happened with Shawn. It's happened with, Hunter. It's happened with, The Rock. It's happened with Mick Foley. It happens all the time that your top heel or your top level heel gets to the point where people start to really like them and they become a babyface. You don't need to be groomed for that position, man. It just kind of happens. If you're good at your job, people are going to start liking you. That's just kind of how it is. All right, so this has been my comparison of Kenny Omega and Roman Reigns. Hopefully I didn't get anything too wrong, because I was sitting here thinking I'm probably going to have to listen to this back. And hopefully if I come to something that I think I may have said wrong by listening back to it, I'll put it in the description, or I'll put it in the comment section below. And but thank you guys for listening, and I'll talk to you guys later, man. Peace out.